Service of the AM 560 Advantage. Membership has its privileges, including early access to event tickets, exclusive contest opportunities, and special members-only content. Join today at 560theanswer.com/join. From the AM 560 Traffic Center, I'm Jill Urchak.
Now, your official weather forecast from the Air Right Heating and Cooling Weather Center.
Tonight will be clear and warm with a low of 75. On Tuesday, expect mostly sunny skies with temperatures nearing the record of 100 degrees last seen in 1995, reaching a high of 97. Tuesday night will be clear to partly cloudy and warm with a low of 76. I'm meteorologist Jason Caterina on AM 560, The Answer.
Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com.
Our founders believed that freedom wasn't just a word, it was a way of life. The freedom to move forward, the freedom to pursue what matters most, the freedom to live fully. But pain has a way of taking those freedoms away. That's why Relief Factor exists and why I endorse it. I've seen how many in this audience have regained their freedom and they're back to living life on their own terms. Relief Factor, it's 100% drug-free. It's a research-based supplement designed to help support a healthy inflammatory response, addressing pain at its source, not just covering it up. Over 1 million Americans have found relief and reclaimed parts of their life they thought were behind them. So this year, as we celebrate 250 years of freedom, ask yourself a simple question. Are you living with the freedom you deserve? Relief Factor. They give you the opportunity to live pain-free and to get back to the life you love. To commemorate our country's birth, they are offering a special patriotic price, just $17.76. So you can celebrate your freedom from pain. Your $17.76 3-week quick start is ready for you right now. ReliefFactor.com, 800-4-RELIEF. 800, the number 4-RELIEF.
Hey Chicagoland, Jeff from Jeff Buys Your House. If you're helping a parent or loved one move into senior living, you're dealing with a lot right now. Finding the right location, coordinating the move, managing their care, and then there's the house, often filled with decades of belongings and memories. The last thing you need is months of repairs, showings, and uncertainty about when it will actually sell. Here's how our veteran-led team helps. We listen to your needs first. Flexible closing date? We can do that. Extra time to sort through everything at your own pace? That works too. You keep what matters, family photos, heirlooms, whatever has meaning, and we handle the rest. For nearly 20 years, we've earned hundreds of 5-star reviews by treating families with patience and respect during life's transitions. If you're ready for a no-obligation conversation, call us at 630-895-9530. That's 630-895-9530 or jeffbuysyourhouse.com. That's jeffbuysyourhouse.com.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this hour of the Shaun Thompson Show is sponsored exclusively by DonleyAuctions.com. They need your guns. Sell for top dollar. DonleyAuctions.com.
From the streets of Melrose Park to the trading floor of the Merc, he's fought for every dollar he's ever earned. And now, with personal liberty and our system of capitalism under assault in America, he's here to seize back our rights from the government. With a cigar in one hand and a copy of the Declaration of Independence in the other, he's Shaun Thompson. And this is the Shaun Thompson Show.
Some folks are born made to wave the flag.
I love these days when I get to talk to my friend. And we are going to discuss the success of Trumponomics, not just the reprivatization of the American economy, but how the supply lines have changed. Straits of Hormuz can kiss my ass. What do you think of that, Squirrel? The whole country has 50%, less than 50% the GDP of the revenue of Walmart. Iran, please. But we may argue about it because the one thing we know about the economy is that we don't know, even when we are a doctor of economics, wicked smart for the Heritage Foundation, and so much more. You've seen him on Fox. Stuart Varney, which he refuses to mention my name to. E.J. Antoni. What are you doing, sexy?
Hey, Shaun, in my defense, I show up, and he's not even there that day. David Ashman was guest hosting for him that day last week. That was the honest to goodness. It's the only reason I didn't mention it.
You know, he lives next door, and then right next door. And I keep yelling. I walk past. I go, Stuart! He refuses to look out of the window or anything. You know, I keep hoping it'll be like the Bronx. We could start yelling at each other. But what I love about what that show really does is he really does focus on how we are growing, the actual growth. And I know you're disappointed in AI, and I say no. After all, I just watched Elaine Chao come back with a robot that looks just like Mitch McConnell. I think it's a success. See what I did there?
Hey, I'm I am not at all down on AI. Genuinely, I think that there's, I think that basically at the end of the day, a lot of the job fears about it are actually overblown. The reason I say that is because, of course, it's going to eliminate some jobs, but at the same time, it's also going to create other jobs. How many app developers were there for smartphones before smartphones were invented? You go back just a couple of decades, nobody was driving for rideshare services like Lyft or Uber because those things didn't even exist. Again, it was a new technology that made that possible, or at least made it economically feasible, right? So AI is going to do the exact same thing for us. It will always, all these technological changes, they always end up creating more jobs than they destroy. My big fear with AI is where the heck are we going to get the power?
So I just, I had to take, when you're a real estate broker, you have to take a lot of continuing ed and all that stuff, right? So I just get through the class. And it's very interesting to see how there's licensing laws to prevent you from using AI and not disclosing it to your clients. So I think what people are missing is AI is a tool like any other tool, like a search engine is a tool. And it will actually make human beings more efficient more often than it will eliminate jobs. And what's interesting, too, is who is it going to hurt? Who is it going to help? You know who I think it's really going to hurt and why I think it'll be obstructed from really taking effect in our economy? Lawyers. It's going to hurt them most of all. Because in the definition of what textbook law is, lawyers stretch it all out, the overbilling, the nonsense. Let me get back to you. My Grok, my Claude, my whatever can do that job 5 times more efficient without a bill for $600 an hour if he's a moron and $1,100 an hour if he isn't. So I think that's what's really interesting is that you're being told it'll affect Johnny on the street. No. It'll affect Winston III more as a lobbyist on K Street than it will Main Street. What do you think?
Shaun, I agree, and I think that's part of the reason why you're seeing so much pushback on AI. Whenever you would have technologies that were eliminating factory jobs, for example, or any kind of blue-collar work, the talking heads on TV never complained about that. They always just said how great those things were. Look, it's making things more efficient. It's reducing costs. Isn't it amazing that now all of a sudden when a technology is coming for the journalism majors' jobs, that now the journalism industry is somehow against this, right? I don't need one of those journalism majors to write me a story anymore. I can plug a bunch of info into Claude, like you mentioned, and it can spit out a news story for me. And I understand that some news outlets have already begun doing that. And you're right. This has become a huge advancement in terms of increasing productivity for entry-level white-collar jobs. So much so, Shaun, I was just hearing from an attorney recently. He's a partner at a very big law firm, and he says, we have a bit of a problem here. He said, because, he goes, we have all of these essentially entry-level positions. It's the jobs you get when you're first out of law school. They work you to death. It's like 80-plus hours a week. And it's only the people who can cut that they give them essentially a legitimate full-time job thereafter with the firm. And then it's from that crop of people that they choose their associate partners and then eventually the full-fledged partners down the road, right? There's this whole hierarchy, but it's not just a hierarchy. It's a kind of people pipeline, right? And he said what we've done by getting rid of all of those entry-level jobs and having AI do all of it is he says, now, where is the next crop of permanent employees going to come? And then where is the next crop of associate partners going to come from? And then finally, the actual managing partners. He says, we're going to have to come up with a new system here.
Well, Grok will make partner. And the other thing is those kids who can't get jobs will start their own. They'll start their own firms. This is the close-sightedness of people. The greatest asset anybody can do is not often working for an existing company. It's creating their own. And we lose that sight of that in the corporatism and the manipulation of information as it exists. And I think it's just an extremely exciting time. Not to mention, I think it can answer the question of where's the $5 trillion we can't account for. I was doing, and I don't know if we talked since I did this whole thing where we looked at When I say we, I mean me and my little crew here. The entitlements as they exist, when you include all of it, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, the ghetto lottery, disability, and Section 8, and all the nonsense. Without public education, you're almost at $3 trillion a year. Almost. You add public education, public schools, and the cost to society, it's in excess of $1 trillion. So now you're talking 3.5. Now you add just Joe Biden's eco-Nazi bills, and you're another $1 trillion and change. So you've got in the budget, you've got roughly between $5 and $6 trillion, give or take, how you on automatic pilot with the 3% kickers and and how much of that money is going to people who are not qualified for it, whether they're illegal aliens, whether they're dead. And AI is the solve for that instantaneously. And that is what Doge was. That's all it was. That's all these kids were. They just released the information. And what you could do to just legitimize the election. When you look at these Democrat enclaves and the information that's now out about the elections in 2020, in 2022, and in 2024, these Democrat areas, it is possible that out of the 435 congressmen, you have 80 congressmen that are illegitimate, weren't elected. It's possible out of the 100 senators, you could have 15 to 20 that are illegitimate because the voter rolls do not coincide with the legitimate votes of these areas. So who's going to figure that out? A man? A man you could bribe? A woman you could bribe? Or a computer that doesn't give a rip if you try to bribe it? I'm telling you, the reason it won't take off, or if it hits any bumps, it's because the thieves themselves are going to prevent it from having this information. What do you think?
Yeah, Shaun, you bring up a really, really great point with Doge. And look, I don't think it's just a matter of, who's going to do it, a person that can be bribed, although that is a very real concern. You're absolutely right. But the other problem, Shaun, is just the sheer volume we're talking about, right? 330 million records. That's what you'd have to go through, because that's how many people there are in this country. And it's not just 330 million entries in one databases. No, there are just thousands upon thousands of these different databases across the country. And that's where Doge had so much success. It took all of these different databases, cross-referenced them, or in some cases just cross-linked them. And that's how we were able to find out, for example, that you had all of these dead people on Social Security. It's because one database that actually had a listing of Social Security numbers and deaths, and then the actual Social Security database, which didn't have records of people's deaths linked there. And so, again, that ability to take this seemingly insurmountable pile of data and actually figure out a way to manage it, that I think is going to be a real key to success here, to really getting Leviathan under control, to exposing the fraud, the corruption, all of that, all of which you're talking about.
What's interesting is this, all of the money that's being stolen and all of the companies that were created to steal it, and how many of those companies, even on the paperwork that had to be filed, either had temporary protected status aliens, illegal aliens, or non-American citizens as registered owners of this, right? And I am always troubled when we talk about this, because I remember the bastardization of the Obama IRS. But when you really look back at the IRS, Margaret Mary Richardson, do you know who that name is? That was the head of the IRS from 93 to 99. The Clinton years. Do you know who she was? She was a classmate of the Duchess of Chaffington. Do you know that when all of the allegations broke about Bill Clinton raping the 4 women, that each one of those women were audited by the IRS? The IRS has become a Gestapo, and it has been for decades, to protect the corrupt politicians in charge of the Leviathan that we speak of. If any government entity ever called for complete automation, it's the IRS. Not that I agree with the number 2 plank of the Communist Manifesto being the taxing system of America. However, when you really look at the fact, I've got callers and wonderful people who for $3,000, they have to call Stephen A. Leahy, who I think you've met. He dressed like Johnny Dollar. He's an advertiser here on the station. Wonderful, brilliant guy. Worked for the IRS. Now he helps people fight and litigate. But the reality is, that entity only seems to bother the decent people. It didn't catch one illegal alien, one temporary protected status. Not one had an IRS problem. Don't you think that's something that the Republican administration or the non-mafia administration really needs to focus on? That our taxing body in the government is political.
Yeah, Shaun, you're absolutely right. Look, people think that Lois Lerner was the first time that happened or it was a one-off. It wasn't. She was not the first. She was simply the first. She was simply the latest at the time in a long line of very corrupt people heading the agency. And, people forget that that's really what actually killed the Tea Party movement. The Tea Party movement was incredibly popular. It was gaining a lot of steam. And so the Obama administration sicked the IRS on them. And anybody who was in any way associated with the Tea Party, you could have given to them or one of their chapters, or you could have been an organization that mentioned the Tea Party or Tea Party values in your charter or in your mission statement, whatever the case may be. You did any of that. And what did the IRS do? Instant audit. And believe me, they put you through the ringer. A gentleman that I know very, very well, you'd know his name if I said it. He got a letter from the IRS saying, you owe us over $100,000, basically. And he took it to his attorney and his accountants. The accountants looked over everything, and they said, absolutely not. The stuff they have outlined here is dead wrong. We literally have all the receipts. But his attorney said, it's not worth fighting it. He goes, you're going to have to pay me well over the amount that they want you to pay. So just write them the check and be done with it. It'll be more expensive to litigate it. Exactly. And he said on principle, sue them anyway or countersue, whatever the case may be. He said, I'm fighting this. I am not writing them a check if I don't have to. I don't care what it costs me. So he literally spent more just so he wouldn't have to write the IRS a check. But the best part is, Shaun, the icing on the cake here is that after an even more thorough review of his books, the IRS admitted that he actually overpaid, and they had to write him a check for about $20,000.
Oh, I love that story. But that's a rare story, and that is. Most people would buckle. And, it's a fascinating reality when you look at the way in which legislators can get away with this kind of abuse. In Minnesota, for example, just a story that broke, they overpaid SNAP by almost double. How do you overpay SNAP by almost double? Who got the money, and where does the money go? And now who are you going to sue? Ghostbusters? And that's just SNAP. You look at Medicare. One scoundrel stole $1.7 billion. One guy. And he got away with it for 15 years, 14 years until this administration. So really it goes to show you that if you're in with the right political party and you're one of the abusers of these so-called entitlement systems, you could steal all you want. And it's far more dangerous to not pay taxes on income you have to admit you paid when you're not political, when you're not a recipient, when you're somebody who has their taxes taken out of their check, who lives on, 60% of what they make. This is the kind of thing where I think intelligence that is not mankind can save the day. Don't you?
Yeah, again, Shaun, just the sheer volume of information that you need to process to demonstrate how widespread this stuff is. Again, the number of different databases and the number of different entries, it's just impossible for human beings to do it, even if they are the most straight-laced folks even if they have right on their side and everything else, right? I get it, but at the same time, we're just kind of getting beyond those capabilities of what a normal person has, or even a large group of people. So yeah, you're right. It is going to be, I think, these new technologies that really help us to prove our case, to prove the fraud, to prove the corruption that, let's be honest, we all know is going on anyway. But again, this gives us the actual. This allows us to bring the actual facts to the discussion, right?
So
and kind of taking a step back, then I think this is just all proof that government is too big, right? The fact that we even have to have this conversation tells you government has gotten way, way too big.
Well, you're on a death loop financially. We talk about it. Right now, the U.S. that debt is at 39.4, soon to be 39.5 trillion. And the 30 trillion now plus added in 18 years. And you look on the U.S. federal spending. The U.S. federal spending is at $7.2 trillion. Now, come on. But take in mind, 5 to 6 trillion of that, if you and I were elected, president and vice president, we couldn't do anything about it. And that's what needs to be tackled. The way in which these entitlements just are forced out of the door, and the insanity of having these policies that must zero out at the end of the year to get reloaded. I mean, it's not just against common sense. It's written into law to be frauded. Why is that so hard to explain to the American people?
Well, I think part of the problem, Shaun, is the fact that there are a lot of Americans who are currently benefiting from that system. And then there's also a very, very large number of Americans who think they either are benefiting from it now or will benefit from it in the future. I talk to a lot of folks and they still believe that they're actually going to make money on Social Security. They actually believe that somehow this is better than if they were to just save their money and throw it in the S&P 500, for example, like what Trump accounts are going to do for young people. And because of that warped perception of reality, they think, oh yeah, these programs are good, and I do want it to stay around, because they don't realize that these things are all losing propositions. And then you do genuinely have some folks who, let's be honest, they're just on the dole. Whether it's medical services, that could be Medicare, that could be Medicaid, or whether it's just cash like you get from Social Security. It could be all kinds of things, housing vouchers, you name it. Shaun, I know we've mentioned this before, but here in D.C. where I am, if you're a family of four, the proverbial family of four, right, with nobody working, if you total up all the different welfare that you can get in D.C., family of four, one more time, nobody working, it is the equivalent between cash and in kind. It is the equivalent to someone in that household having an income of over $122,000 a year. Why on earth would somebody work?
Yeah. As just in the basis of the mathematics, you almost have to tell people you're better off to be a suck on, and that's the goal, right? To get more and more people to do it. When you look at the collapse in these areas, I think it's unbelievable. When you look at Manhattan alone, and the instant collapse of the real estate, each unit losing $182,000 now. I mean, it goes up every week. Colorado, you remember Colorado, some of the most expensive real estate, the most valuable area. They're collapsed in the downtown Democrat-run areas. That Aurora, that apartment building boarded up where the Trens de Aragua took over. And, you look at even in California now, how they've attacked those jobs that were created out of nowhere. People were struggling, but they were decent people trying to go to work. How they're trying to now unionize them for Uber drivers and Uber Eats. And you look at the collapse of orders on all of those eat delivery services that thrive during COVID. I mean, you've got some bad stuff happening, but what I do like, it's really exclusively happening in the worst run areas. And that's something that we need to focus on during this next cycle, don't you think?
Yeah, Shaun, the states are laboratories of democracy, right? As somebody famously said. And
Yes.
That means that California can choose to do X and Texas can choose to do Y, right? Illinois can choose to do X, Indiana can choose to do Y. And around it goes, whether it's Massachusetts, whether it's New York, all these different blue states, they can do what they want. Florida and these other red states, they can do what they want. And you ask, what do people really like? The most important thing is not to ask, how do they vote at the ballot box? How do they vote, rather, with their feet? That's what's really important. And what that tells us is that they don't want these kinds of policies. They don't want forced union rules like you see in California and like you're talking about with these different rideshare services or other kinds of gig work. They don't want the lower employment that results. They don't want the higher prices that result. And so people do end up leaving. Or if they can't leave, sadly, if they're forced to stay in a place like Illinois or like California, then they end up themselves just getting on the dole a lot of times.
Well,
and to this point, Shaun, if you look at how many private sector jobs Illinois has today, if you can believe this, it's actually lower than the number of private sector jobs that were in Illinois right before COVID.
Oh, we've had, I don't know how many companies that were, 80 years old, 70 years old, 100. We just had another one leave. And what's funny is that Pritzker, the slob that he is talking about a soybean company that's expanding. Well, it's a grant from the federal government for $250 million. So they're going to expand $250 million to the penny. And what'll happen is the end. But what I'm curious to know, because you're in the belly of the beast, right? You live with these scallywags, which I don't know how you do it. You must just douse yourself in Halston Z14. But when you look at what's happening and how they're going to
pose themselves as a potential national candidate. Who do you have? You've got Any Twosome Newsome with the whore wife that's stealing money from an NGO. You've got J.B. Pritzker, who's a walking punchline and a fraud. And then you've got Rahm Emanuel. Are you watching the nine-finger Yakuza position himself as somehow an answer? But the reality is, if you focus on the areas they govern, they're the areas that you run from. I really believe that when they say, oh, we got a rise of communism and socialism, well, these are the areas that implemented it for the last half a century. You don't have a problem with the rise of communism. You got a problem with the result of it in your existing big cities. I don't think they stand a chance among people with an IQ over 60 or who are not on the dole. I think they're going to get less than the 360 counties they always win. I'm curious to know what you think.
Shaun, it really is. I mean, it's not that it's what's the opposite of a crowded field, right? It's incredibly sparse when you look at that Democratic bench. And look, take this with a grain of salt. I'm not a political scientist. I'm a monetary scientist. But just kind of from my own novice point of view here, it really seems like they don't have much of a bench left at this point, because you're right. All of the people who right now seem to be positioning themselves to try to run, they have been the architects of all these different failures, whether at the state or the local level. So yeah, it's unclear. Now, I would not be surprised if you end up with two dark horses in the next cycle on both the Republican and the Democrat side. If you get somebody from not within but without the Trump administration, and then a relative unknown as far as the Democrats go. Now, we'll see. But again, it's tough to say who they're going to, what kind of team they're going to assemble for 2028.
You and I talked.
That's not to say it's going to be an easy victory for Republicans, but I'm curious to see what will happen.
Well, the Democrat areas will steal like they always do. But you and I talked. I'm telling you, Besson and Hageman or DeSantis and Hageman. But Hageman has got to be there. You keep an eye on that girl. I'm telling you something. That lady has got it going on. I appreciate you always making time for me. You're coming. I know I checked with you last time, but you're definitely coming for Shaun Fest, right?
I got my hotel booked and everything.
Oh, this is fantastic. Now, let me know how long it takes you to pick out the outfit. Now, let's not go too crazy. Nothing with lapels on the vest, okay?
All right. I promise.
Something with linen. Nice linen. It's going to be August. Thanks very much, brother, for always making time. You know I appreciate it.
Hey, Shaun, my pleasure.
We'll be back with your calls and comments.
He's Shaun Thompson.
Hello, Mr. Thompson.
And this is the Shaun Thompson Show on AM